Hello, everybody. Mike Hlas, Cedar Rapids Gazette here, thegazette.com, and with me is Nathan Ford of those same entities. And it's NCAA tournament week, and we're in Iowa, so we're going to talk about Iowa in the NCAA tournament. That makes sense. Nathan, I have never been to either the Grand Canyon or Grand Canyon University. Have you?
I have not, unfortunately.
It
Which
looks
one would you
beautiful.
rather go to?
I didn't really care for school.
No, yeah, I don't. Yeah, your background, I guess, gives it away a little bit too.
I don't know how you can live in the United States for as long as I have and never have been to the Grand Canyon, but there's people in New York City who've never been to the Empire State Building.
Or Iowa. They've never been to Iowa either.
I've never seen a Grand Canyon basketball game. I think I skipped past their game against New Mexico State Saturday because when I stopped on it, it was already a blowout. They must be good, are they?
Well, I watched the replay of that game after finding out that's who Iowa would play, and yeah, I mean, I think everybody that makes the NCAA tournament is good. Not to use the coach speak cliche, but I mean, they've won a lot of games. They haven't really beaten anybody of particular note, but it's a talented team. It's an experienced team. It's a team Iowa should beat, but of course, they're plenty capable of beating Iowa too.
Before I get off this Grand Canyon thing, the university is 250 miles from the Grand Canyon itself. Does that make any sense?
Oh, that's why I said I tweeted that I sometimes refer to the University of Iowa as Mount Rushmore University.
Yeah, or Lake Michigan or something, the Gateway Arch.
It's good branding, I gotta say. I think when just a random basketball fan is looking through their bracket, they're like, "Oh, Grand Canyon, that sounds more intriguing than Iona."
Oh yeah, and more imposing.
Yeah.
I mean, my gosh. Have you ever seen a photo of that walkway they have there?
No.
It's like one of these deals where you can walk out over the canyon.
Oh, wow.
It's not for the squeamish. The team. I mean, okay, I think it's a pretty wide assumption that Iowa wins this game, and what happens after that. We'll talk about the possibilities. But is there a chance Iowa loses this thing on Saturday in Indiana Farmers Coliseum, which is a whole different story in itself?
I think there's a chance. I'm not going to predict it, but it's March Madness. I'm not going to predict that Iowa loses. I'm going to predict that Iowa wins. But
no, that's what I meant. You're not going to predict Iowa loses?
I thought really hard about this one a lot. I was kind of on a roll there. I picked the sweep the one week. I picked the split the next week. I picked Illinois, and I thought I feel like Iowa's going to win this game, but it's March Madness. I mean, it's always possible, if unlikely. It's when you look at Grand Canyon, the thing that's most interesting to me about them is when you think of like an underdog team in March Madness from a small, not a small university, but a small program in Grand Canyon, a small conference. You think of an upset special team being a team that has experienced guards, good three-point shooting, potentially maybe like a pressure defense or some sort of thing that's just going to throw a wrench into a high majors game plan or system. And Grand Canyon is actually a big, slow team, which is not something we see a lot from some of these mid-majors. So that's kind of interesting. I think just based on watching them play, they're good, but they're not on Iowa's level, and it's a team Iowa should beat. But that is one thing to watch. I think it's not like a Lehigh when they beat Duke, or like name your mid-major. They have a little bit different profile roster-wise, it seems like.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think the only way that Iowa has serious trouble in this game is if Garza gets in foul trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And the NCAA officials call it the opposite of the way they called the Illinois game last Saturday. And, Garza gets 2 quick ticky-tacks or something, and he finds himself with 4 fouls with 12 minutes to go or something, because Grand Canyon has the 7-footer and the 6'10" guy, and maybe they go to work then, because Iowa doesn't have Jack Nunge. It doesn't have a backup center. It just doesn't. And Garza's going to play big minutes in this tournament. That's no surprise. So if he just plays his game, I think that he'll, look, these Grand Canyon guys, they haven't played anybody like this guy. And I'm not dismissing them. I don't do that. I love the so-called mid-majors. I love them. But reality sets in at some point. They're not playing Luka Garza, who's a unanimous first-team All-America. They're playing Seattle and Utah Valley and, who's it and what's it of Division I basketball. New Mexico State, and I can't name them all, and I'm not going to, but there's some Cal team in there somewhere, I'm sure.
They avoided Chicago State this year, though.
Yeah, Chicago State. They really belong in the Western Athletic Conference. But what they are, though, is this is a university that's it's trying to supplant Arizona State as the University of Phoenix and in the state of Arizona. They've got like 20,000 students and I think 70,000 online students. It's one of these places. It's a for-profit. And they want to be a basketball school. They don't have football. So they had Dan Marley, who's one of the most popular athletes who's ever been in Phoenix, Arizona. And he was the head coach, did a nice job until last year. Things went a little off. They canned him. It's like, we want something better. And they brought in Bryce Drew, who's taken 2 other schools to the NCAA tournament. Had a disaster of a year in his last season at Vanderbilt, but the guy has taken 3 teams to the big dance. They're serious about this. And they're like a lot of programs. They're a way station for the unhappy, the disenchanted, the I want to be somebody somewhere else guys. This guy, the 7-footer Midtgaard of Denmark, he started at Wichita State. They've got a guard named Dixon who's played it. This is his 3rd D1 school. And it's not that hard to throw together a basketball team real fast, and they've done it.
Yeah, I think I read that they only had 2 seniors that had been in the program since they were freshmen, and sort of that went through the D2 transition. And you're right about how serious they take it because I was aware of the Dan Marley being the coach there. And when I was looking it up again this week, I expected to see that he had been fired. I just remembered him, being fired as like, oh, Grand Canyon had been slipping for a few years and wasn't going in the right direction. But they really only had 1 off year, and they were like, bye. We want to win. We want to get in the NCAA tournament, and they've made it. And that's their expectation now, is they want to be one of those schools that is routinely in the NCAA tournament. And Midtgaard he's a solid player. Like you said, comes from Wichita State and is probably not. He's a talent and a size that you would not expect to see from a WAC team.
Yeah.
Watching him, he's not as versatile as Garza, but he does have the size, the type of size that has, kind of bothered Garza in games before. Similar size as like a Dickinson or a Coburn. He's nowhere near those guys, talent-wise, or I even think just defensively, but it's something to keep in mind. The one thing I thought watching their game against New Mexico State is, it got past the under 16 and there hadn't been like a stoppage of play for a media timeout, and Midtgaard was asking out of the game 5.5 minutes in. He had scored and he was like doing one of these at the sideline, and it just kind of made me think, I'm not sure that's going to be a guy that can keep up with Garza for 40 minutes. Now, obviously, that could have been a sort of one-off situation where maybe he was hurt, he had a little ding or something, but
Well, he's like 270 pounds, right?
Most guys that big are not running up and down the floor like Garza. So that's going to be a tough matchup for him, but they do have Laver, the other big guy, who's much more versatile, solid 3-point shooter and can step out. So that's going to be an interesting matchup. But like you said, it would be a game where Iowa would have liked to have Nunji just for that extra support, especially defensively. But in the end, I think they'll manage.
Yeah, I do too. And I'll repeat it. Midgard has not guarded Luka Garza.
Right.
And he's going to see some things that he hasn't seen on a college basketball court. I mean, I don't know what he saw in competition in Denmark, but they don't do what Garza does in the WAC. Okay. How about we look ahead then? I mean, we can do that. The coaches and players can't, or say they can't. We can.
I was on social media and I saw fans saying they were taking it one game at a time. I was like, no, don't leave that to the players.
That's not their job.
Yeah.
When I use that excuse at home, I don't use that excuse at home. No. I can't look ahead to when the bills are due. Well, I mean, the second round game, I mean, here's the deal in this tournament. I don't care who you are. You look at Illinois or Gonzaga, they're in the same boats. There's no skating to the Sweet 16. I don't think there is. Some years number one seeds do, but I don't think this is one of those years. I mean, Gonzaga would have to play the winner of Oklahoma and Arkansas? Or
Gonzaga, Missouri.
Missouri. Okay. Those are two capable teams. I'd pick Gonzaga over either, of course, but Iowa with a number 2 seed will get either Oregon or VCU. If Iowa is still playing on after Saturday night, then you can't look past the next game. I mean, Oregon was the regular season champion in the Pac-12. That's not chop liver. That's a team that's 20-6. Dana Altman, I mean, he falls out of bed and wins 20 games every year. And then VCU is like, you got to explain to a lot of people who they are. They play in the Atlantic 10. They win a lot of games. They were in the A10 title game. And they've got a lot of impressive statistics that I'll talk about. Okay, so how dangerous is the Monday game for Iowa?
That, looking at Oregon, if you're a 2 seed, you don't expect to be playing a power conference champion in the second round. And that's what Iowa possibly could be faced with. Now, obviously, the Pac-12 is 5th on that power, probably 6th, maybe, if you include the Big East. But
yet it's the Conference of Champions.
It is the Conference of Champions. I was just thinking, Bill, how amazing it would be if Bill Walton was calling the Grand Canyon Iowa game. It's too bad because he would have a field day.
He would say about that hole in the ground.
Yeah. Oh man, but and if it was the Ducks, he would be doing a lot of quacking, of course. Yes. So we're gonna be missing that. But Oregon is it's a dangerous team, and not just because they won the Pac-12, and I guess the reason they're a 7 seed is because they really didn't have a ton of quality wins because there weren't a ton to come by in the Pac-12. Yeah. But it's a team that was on, I think, 2 different COVID pauses. And right around January and early February, didn't really get to play a lot, dealt with some injuries to some of their key guys. But now they've really started to gel and won a bunch of games here at the end of the year until they lost to Oregon State, which somehow won the Pac-12 tournament. But Familiar face is their highest usage player, Omarui, the Rutgers transfer. And then you look at Chris Duarte, the guard, is an NBA prospect and a very difficult matchup on that end. And so that's a really dangerous team. And again, Iowa would be favored against Oregon and VCU, but I mean, to me, it looks like it's like thinking about Wisconsin as, I can't remember if they're the 8 or the 9 seed, but think about the battles Iowa had with Wisconsin as an 8. That's what you're going to expect against in a second round game. It's you don't just get a walk to the Sweet 16.
It's an un-Big Ten team. I mean, they don't have a starter taller than 6'6", but and it's not a great rebounding team, but they force about 14 turnovers a night. They make over 7 steals a game. They score. You mentioned Omarui, Eugene of Eugene. Again, you didn't use his proper name.
Yeah. Did not even make that connection. That's amazing.
No. And Duarte's a terrific player. Their players come from everywhere but Oregon. I mean, it's ridiculous. They've got Omarui. I can never say his name. Omarui is a Canadian. Duarte is from the Dominican Republic. They've got 3 guys from Michigan. They've got Massachusetts, Georgia in their rotation. They don't even have anybody from the Western time zone. But this is, that's college basketball life. They've got, they are quick, they are aggressive, and first they have to beat VCU.
And they're a good shooting team too. And yeah, you're right about VCU, led by Mr. Bones Highland, who I learned that is actually a nickname that he was given because he was so skinny, and it made me realize that I was not good enough at basketball to be nicknamed Bones, unfortunately, growing up. But VCU, I mean, everybody remembers their run to the Final Four and just the way they used to play under Shaka Smart. And the last few years, they were they didn't really play like that anymore, but they're back to a pressure defense team and a team that could really, really mess with Iowa's ball handling if that were to be the case. So that's another tough matchup if that were to be the case.
Well, this impressed me when I was trying to bone up on VCU. They're 5th in the nation in both block shots and steals. That's quite a combination.
Yeah.
And they've got a 6'9" guy off the bench who has 61 block shots. As a team, they've got 140. That is a ton for 26 games. They're just a good defensive team. I think offensively, from what I've seen, nothing special. Their outside shooting is pedestrian. They're not a big scoring team, but they play winning basketball in a pretty good D1 league. The A10 is like the next step down from the big boys.
Yeah, I really don't know who to give the edge to in that first round game, Oregon and VCU. And I think either way, Iowa's going to have a handful with either of those teams. I don't know. Do you think Iowa would have, obviously they're not going to say they do, but do you think Iowa would have a preference of who they matched up with in the second round?
I don't know. I maybe Oregon, just because Garza would just dwarf those guys. And I haven't researched how Oregon has done against good big men, for instance, USC's, but it's unimaginable to me that a major college team the Garza is playing against won't have anybody taller than 6'6" in the starting lineup. That would be intriguing.
Yeah, that would be. I think they would probably rather play Oregon just because Garza would have that advantage, and the way VCU plays defense, I think Iowa can sort of play its game a little bit more against Oregon. The last time Oregon played USC, I think was that kind of like rescheduled game on that Monday night a few weeks ago, about a month ago, I guess, that wasn't even scheduled originally. And I think so. Mobley had 11 points in 34 minutes, so really didn't do a whole lot. But yeah, I think I would give the edge to, or I would, if I were Iowa, I would probably rather play Oregon.
Something that I want to mention here, and I'm groping to find it in on the internet as we talk, which is not too professional, but okay. Historically, number 2s against number 15s, which Iowa is dealing with Saturday. Number 2s are 132-8. That's pretty good.
You'll take that.
Yeah.
If you're 2 seed.
Would you, if you didn't already know this, well, you probably wouldn't be able to get this, but the last number 2 that lost to a 15, who was it?
Well, I remember that I believe Michigan State lost to Middle Tennessee and Norfolk State beat Missouri the same year, right?
Yeah, 5 years ago, Middle Tennessee beat Michigan State.
Yeah.
90-81, in fact.
Yeah.
That's the last time. That was 5 years ago, and it's only the 8th time in the history of the tournament. That covers 35 2 against 15s, 140 games. So Iowa's got the history in favor of it. Then we get to the 2s against either the 7s or 10s. Oregon's the 7. The 2s are 68-29 against 7s. 70%. That's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty good. I like that. The 2s against the 10s are 38-22. That's only 63%. That's weird.
Mm.
And here's something that kind of surprised me is that the 2s against the 3s, which would be in the Sweet 16 if Kansas and Iowa get there, the 2s are 41-27, 60%. So that's pretty good. How many 2s do you think have won national titles since the tournament expanded to 64 teams, which was 1985?
So that's 35 years.
Yeah, 34 or 35 tournaments.
I would probably say like 6, 7, maybe.
Close. 5.
5.
Yeah. 22 number 1 seeds have won it all.
Wow.
So it's good to be king, but number 2s have got a pretty good record in this thing. Number 2s have won 70% of every game they've played in NCAA tournaments. And well over 70% in the first week of NCAA tournaments. So I'm trying to give positive feedback for everybody out there, the nervous Nellies who've seen bad stuff happen before, because the last time Iowa was seeded higher than 7th, you know what happened.
Yeah.
The year was 2006. The Palace of Auburn Hills, Northwestern State.
Oh, man.
We know the rest.
Purple teams with Northwestern in the name. Something about
Yeah. They don't have a single one in front of them in Indianapolis.
That's the good news. And of course, on the positive side, the last time Iowa was a 2 seed, it went to the Elite 8. I know it didn't end exactly how you wanted it to when they got there, but
right.
They had a nice, memorable run there. So,
but if you recall, and maybe you won't since you weren't alive then, Iowa had hard games in the second round and in the Sweet 16. I don't even remember who they played in the first round, but they
Santa
beat
Clara.
them convincingly. Yeah, okay. They won convincingly. They played very well. The round of 32, they play UTEP, and that went to the very end. A fella named Tim Hardaway played for UTEP, and he was fun to watch. And I mean, that was the round of 32. Mm-hmm. UTEP wasn't even supposed to be there. They played Arizona on Arizona's home court, and UTEP took them out. And then, boy, they gave Iowa everything they wanted. So being a number 2 seed means you get one bunny. You probably don't get 2.
Well, and the last couple of years, Iowa fans are familiar with sort of that 2 seed second round matchup. They ran into some juggernauts, Gonzaga, Villanova, that just blasted them in games that we would have went into that thinking Iowa had a shot of staying close and making that a game. So obviously that's what you want to see, is a comfortable win. But I just don't see either of these first two games being games where your Iowa fans are going to be too comfortable early. Part of that is just the pace that Grand Canyon plays, where they can, they're going to slow it down and potentially have a lower possession game. Iowa has done fairly well in those games. I think Wisconsin has played 3 of their 4 lowest possession games, and obviously Iowa came out on top in all 3, but a couple of those were close because they weren't scoring a ton of points. I still think Iowa wins comfortably, but I don't think it's going to be a blowout from the first 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. And then the same with Oregon or VCU. That's just, I just don't think you can go into that expecting an easy double-digit victory.
Mm-hmm. And talking specifically about the Hawkeyes, you can't count on anything health-wise.
Mm.
It's like, just, especially, of course, with Frederick and Wieskamp. Well, Wieskamp looked pretty healed up to me, but McCaffrey said that Frederick wasn't right in the last 7 minutes of that Illinois game. So it's like, okay, you rest up until we play again. You got to have everybody who's left. From here on out. So it's a fingers crossed deal with Frederick, and to a lesser extent, I think, Wieskamp.
Yeah, I think, we talked about this before the Big Ten tournament, but I think in the long run, it's okay that Iowa lost that semifinal game, because, and I believe the coaching staff would have made the smart choices personnel wise in that championship game, but the pressure and the opportunity there to win a Big Ten championship plays a role, and to not even have to think about playing those guys an extra minute, I think is beneficial for this NCAA tournament run, because you're right, they need everybody, and it's not the same type of turnaround as that Big Ten tournament, but it's still 2 potentially high intensity games in 3 mm-hmm. days, and mm-hmm. in a different weird environment than what players are used to.
Yes. And history's full of teams that had a lot of fun at conference tournaments and tore through the thing, or like Ohio State played 4 games in 4 days and almost won it. And then as soon as they come back, they just seem flat. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I hate to look way ahead this week, but just for fun, what do you think awaits in the Sweet 16 if Iowa could get there? And I guess the 2 obvious answers are Kansas or USC, but are those the answers?
Probably. And I think a lot of Iowa fans were excited to see Kansas pop up on the 3 line, just because of the question marks that are surrounding them having to pull out of the Big 12 tournament. I don't think I saw the latest update, but I think there was still questions about whether McCormick, their big guy, was even going to be able to play in the NCAA tournament because of whatever COVID positive or contact tracing situation involved them. So if you're saying that's your 3 seed, that seems pretty favorable. Obviously nobody wants to see Kansas have to pull out. I'm not saying they would, or players have to miss games because of COVID, but if that is the situation, that's what you deal with. So, but I think when I just filled out a bracket and just went through it and just picked, I usually just go through it and pick whatever comes to my mind, whatever feels right, and then I'll just go back and figure out if that actually made any sense. But when I just picked it, I had picked USC to advance that far into the Sweet 16, and I think that's going to be a popular pick because of Mobley, and both Mobleys, but especially the freshman Evan, a potential top 2, top 3 NBA draft pick, 7 feet, can pass, can score, defend. It's just going to be, again, a really tough matchup for Garza, and just like Garza is going to be a tough matchup for him if it comes to fruition. So USC though has lost they lost 3 out of their last 4. I watched their game against Colorado in the Pac-12 tournament, and they just looked okay. So again, it would be a game Iowa would be favored in, but I think that would be an interesting matchup if it got that far. And I know most people in the state of Iowa would rather see Iowa and Drake in the Sweet 16.
Yeah, that's going to take some doing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's going to take some real doing. First of all, Drake's got to get into the round of 64. I'm going to that game Thursday night, I'm happy to say. And Drake and Wichita State, that's kind of a toss-up game. And then if Drake wins, it gets USC, and that would be interesting how Drake deals with Evan Mobley. I mean, this guy they're talking about him as like a number 3 or 4 pick in the NBA draft, 7-footer.
Well, Drake's got Darnell Brody, who I've been really impressed with watching him this year. That does not look like a Missouri Valley Conference post player necessarily. Obviously it'd be tough. It's going to be tough for him if they get that far to match up against a possible NBA star, but it's they do at least have some size to go against him.
I'm not familiar with Wichita State's team. I know that they're a 2-point pick in this game. Last I looked. Do you know much about them? How's Drake's chances?
I haven't seen them too much, but they don't have much on the resume beyond beating Houston, which is really what carried them into the tournament. I think the big story with them is the interim coach that's now the full-time coach because of the Greg Marshall situation in the offseason, where with allegations of bullying and player mistreatment, and they let him go, and 7 or 8 players at least transferred, and yet here they are with an interim coach who's been named the full-time coach, Isaac Brown, and so they're going to be really excited to be in this game, but I think it's a game Drake can win for sure.
Is there anybody on the Gonzaga side of the bracket who can put an end to Gonzaga's season?
I have to go through and remember what's the matching.
Virginia would be the highest. I think Virginia's the 4 and Creighton's the 5.
Yeah, I don't see either of those teams. I guess Creighton, with the way they can score, would have a chance of keeping up with Gonzaga in sort of a one-off game and possibly winning. But it is funny how Gonzaga got paired with a 2, 3, and 4 seeds that they've already beaten by double digits. So Gonzaga to me is the clear favorite, and Creighton, as I said, that has had some really questionable results over the last few weeks and just got blown out by Georgetown in the Big East title game. So they're probably not going to be a popular pick. I would expect Gonzaga to at least make the Elite Eight, and I would expect them to. When I just picked it, I mean, they're my national championship pick. They're just the most talented team to me with experience. They can score, they can defend. They're just the most complete team in the country to me. And so I think another game against Iowa would be fun, but right now I have Gonzaga going all the way.
Yeah, if I were Iowa, I would rather, I think, see anybody else in a regional final if it gets to that. I mean, I know they lost twice to Illinois, but I think if Iowa plays a great game, it can beat Illinois. I'm not sure. I mean, sure, it could beat Gonzaga, but it would take a supreme effort, I think. I mean, you're talking about a team with how many NBA players? 3?
Yeah, at least.
Well, that's it hasn't been as much the case in recent years, but usually the rule of thumb is you got to have 2 or 3 NBA players to win the thing. And it's kind of gone by the wayside a little bit. But even Virginia a couple of years ago had a couple of guys who either are in the NBA or who are on, G League on the cusp of NBA. Should we look back at the Big Ten tourney real quick?
Yeah. What was that experience like?
It was good. I was very leery about having it in a football stadium, and it's impossible to be ideal. but it was configured as best they could. They had a curtain going right down the middle of the stadium to make it feel, half as big. And the fans were pretty close for the most part, although with the 8,000 seating cap, there were a lot of people upstairs too. But they made noise. And it was so nice to hear real crowd noise instead of the canned garbage. And, real reactions, both positive, negative, and what have you, before, during, and after the game. It's like, okay, that's how this thing's supposed to be. So that gave me, it's like after an entire season of studio basketball, that was fun. And the basketball itself was really interesting, I thought, because my number one observation coming away from it is there are guards in that league who weren't on the top two all Big Ten teams, and in some cases not even on the top three all Big Ten teams, who are really good. Andre Curbelo of Illinois had a great tournament. He's a freshman who is just a difference maker, and he gave Iowa fits. And then on Ohio State's side, Dwayne Washington and C.J. Walker had wonderful tournaments, 4 straight days of good play, really nice players. And Michigan's Mike Smith picked up the slack with Isaiah Liver's absence. And I saw Smith's game Friday. He was unbelievable. 15 assists and 18 points, just played a great game. And so the quality of play in that league is what people say it is, and big leads weren't safe. Purdue got way behind against Ohio State and came back. Michigan started slowly Friday against Maryland and came back. A lot of resilience on those teams and a lot of talent. And sometimes I get real leery when conferences hype themselves nonstop for months after month. And it's like, okay, but your conference hasn't been a champion since the year 2000. Win the championship and then talk about it. But I think that they've got the horses for somebody to get it done and maybe get a couple teams to the Final Four. Your thoughts?
I agree with you. I enjoyed watching the tournament on TV. It felt much more like a normal conference tournament than games that we've been seeing throughout the season, because you could, like you said, you could hear the fans. You could hear Indiana fans booing their coach, who is no longer their coach. You could hear Illinois fans booing Iowa's players and just living it up with their program back in the national prominence. And it was cool. CBS was relentlessly, like obviously they're going to do, was relentlessly hyping that this was the first time that 4 top 10 teams were in a conference tournament semifinals. And the fact that we got 2 rivalry games out of it, Michigan, Ohio State, and Iowa, Illinois. You could not, if you're the Big Ten, you could not have asked for a better week given the circumstances. So I thought that was great to see. Going into the tournament, it seems like Illinois is kind of a popular pick among a lot of people to at least reach the national championship game, if not win it all, just because of the way they're playing. They've got Dosunmu back, and he is a capable difference maker. He's going to probably more than anybody get the Kemba Walker comparison, even though Illinois is a 1 seed and is plenty capable of, has a talented team. But Kofi Coburn has impressed me even more over the last couple of weeks than he did already. And he was just dominant. Garza still got his stats, but Kofi played an incredible game, both sides of the ball. And I think I'd said before a few weeks ago that I was sort of questioning where he ranked, just because he has a sort of a limited outside game, doesn't have much of a jump shot, doesn't really shoot free throws very well. But if he's using his size and athleticism to dominate like that, it really doesn't matter. That is a huge piece of it for Illinois. And like you said, Curbelo is just sunshine. I mean, he is just smiling and all over the place defensively, can dribble through anybody. And so Illinois is the team most capable of winning the national championship out of the Big Ten to me. Part of that is because of Livers' injury with Michigan. But I don't know. What do you think sort of that national narrative coming out of this is if the Big Ten goes another year without winning a national championship? I think there's obviously going to be jokes about it, but is there going to be sort of a referendum on the hype the Big Ten gets almost every year with the amount, just because of the depth, but they don't have that national championship?
I think if you get a team or two to the Final Four and they're in a knockdown drag out, no, I don't think so. But if you have teams stepping on banana peels too early, or they go up against Gonzaga or Baylor or Cade Cunningham, or, pick your wild card good team and do a belly flop, then yeah, they're going to get mocked. I'd be surprised if that happened.
Yeah.
I mean, you talked about Coburn, and I mean, his points came easy.
Yeah.
He gets position and he doesn't get budged, and he loses his defenders. And, Garza in the last few weeks in head-to-heads against Dickinson and Coburn has come up second best.
Mm-hmm.
So Iowa, to me, has to play at its peak to have a chance in this thing. Illinois has got, Dosunmu can carry them if he has to. Frazier can get hot and light you up. Curbelo makes things happen, distributes the ball. Their spacing and ball movement sensational. And then they're just Coburn's going to eventually face somebody who's his equal, but it might take quite a while in that tournament. I don't know where the others fit. I think Ohio State's always capable of beating anybody. Michigan, I don't know. They still got great players, but and Wagner's to me is an NBA player. But are they ready for the biggest stage? I'm just not sure. And I wouldn't rule out Purdue getting to like the Elite Eight. I don't know their path. I haven't had a lot of time to look at the other three regions.
I think they're in Baylor's bracket.
Okay, well, Trevion Williams and some of those guys on Purdue's team are tough suckers. And Painter knows how to get through a bracket up to a point. So that's going to be interesting. And I think the Big 12 is going to be somebody to watch with Baylor, with Texas, and with Oklahoma State. They could all bomb in a bad way, but they also, in my mind, could be in this thing for quite a while.
Funny you mentioned that, because when I was just going through the bracket and just picking what kind of popped to my mind based on how the trends are playing and how I've seen teams playing lately, I ended up with all three of those teams in the Final Four. I'll probably go back and change that, because if I look at some of those individual matchups a little bit more closely, I'm not sure I would, because I just see Texas in the Final Four, for instance, and I'm like, I don't know how I ended up with that. But I think if you're Illinois, you're a little bit not worried, but you're kind of salty at the committee for giving Oklahoma State a 4 seed when that team just beat Baylor and nearly won the Big 12 tournament, has the best NBA prospect in the country. I mean, that's not a team you want to face in a Sweet 16 game. So that's kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I mean, there are a lot of people out there who thought that was going to be 2 or a 3, and I'm not, that's if you're Iowa, you're glad not to see them, in that bracket. You just are. And I agree with you on Texas. I mean, if they've got things right, they can be dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
So looking forward to this tournament. I guess we should wrap this up. and we don't want to spend too much on the looking ahead a week or 2 weeks, but you're saying Gonzaga for the whole enchilada.
I am.
Okay. I find that hard to argue against. I saw them in person and they're the best team I've seen, but by a sliver over Illinois. It's just that with Timmy Kispert and Suggs, and I cannot pronounce his name right, Ayayi,
I think you got it.
that's 4 players who you can't sag on anybody on that team or you're going to get killed. And I wouldn't bet on Gonzaga because they got low odds, but I sure wouldn't bet against them.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where people, not everybody, but they kind of slip out of the national picture a little bit against the West Coast Conference schedule. I know they played BYU, but it wasn't a ranked BYU team this year. St. Mary's was down. So they haven't played anybody really, really good in a while, but I cannot shake what I saw in the non-conference schedule. They were so good.
It occurs to me I should have asked you this like Bill Walton at the beginning of this. Have you ever been to the Grand Canyon?
What's your name again?
Oh, God, I'm going to miss him.
I know. Maybe he'll be on the NIT calls on ESPN.
Oh, I hope so, but this conference of champion stuff, when these teams always go down in flames so fast, and then he was heartbroken because Kentucky didn't get in.
I heard that he was arguing very hard for Oregon State to get an at-large bid if they had it won on Saturday.
But he calls the NCAA tournament. No, he is it the tournament committee? Yeah, he calls the Politburo. That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
We'll miss him.
Yes. All right. I presume there's next week. Who knows? How can we ever know? But if there is, see you then.